Chad is a wealth manager. He's a financial planner based in Anchorage, Alaska. So for those of you who haven't been there, like me, you can only be jealous of what it must be like to live there. And Chad will tell you it's not all peaches and cream, but there's a lot of goodness there, and I know he likes it. But from Alaska, grew up I guess your dad was a financial planner,
He,
financial manager of some kind.
yep, he was in the financial industry, so I grew up in this. Absolutely.
So he taught you, and so you brought it into your adult life, and now you've got your own practice, Veritas Wealth Management, and and I'll put all this in the show notes, guys. So if you want to get in touch with Chad, which I hope you will, that you'll be able to do it. But the one thing I wanted to point out is Chad's written a book that was published just about a year ago,
Mhm.
called Forging Financial Freedom. And I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about that. But that's my introduction, Chad. I'm not going to tell any more of your story. You tell us your story. If you get to know us and we're getting to know you, what is important for us to know about you beyond just those bullet points I rattled through?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that introduction. And I did. I grew up in the financial industry. I grew up talking about money, and I thought that was normal. And I've realized as I've gotten older, I realized very soon, even in college, that a lot of my friends, like money was not talked about in their home unless it was a problem. So it was
Mm,
only brought up under negative circumstances. And it's no wonder that people have a tendency to either bury their head in their sand and ignore money or allow money to control them because we don't often have a healthy relationship with money. Money is just a tool. There's a verse in the Bible often gets misquoted saying money is the root of all evil, but it's not. It's the love of money. It's or basically what that verse is saying is like you are to be a steward of money. You should manage it so it doesn't manage you.
hmm
And I just thought it was normal to talk about money. And before Dave Ramsey, I know you and I are both familiar with Dave, but there was a guy named Larry Burkett, and he had a wonderful ministry called Crown Financial. It was all about stewardship. And as a young kid, we grew up listening to that radio show, and I I thought it was child abuse. I'm like, really, we're going to learn about budgeting? Like I'm 7. I don't need to know this stuff, but it was just a part of our life. And here's what I found out at a very early age. I saw when people start stewarding their finances, when they start using God's money in God's intended purpose and God's intended way, it doesn't just stay in that area of their life. As a ripple effect, that discipline, that intentionality has a ripple effect into everything that they do. And I had the blessing of watching my parents, my dad especially, teach these classes in our churches, local churches and community. We saw lives transformed by stewardship. And even though I went into medicine, that was the direction I was headed. I have a degree in biochemistry. I was on the path to becoming a surgeon, and God redirected me. And I thought surgery was going to be my way to help people live a better version of themselves and pursue a life of more abundance and freedom. But God has given me finances as a way to do that. And I'm just so grateful for the way I grew up, not just being taught it, but being modeled, because I believe more is caught than taught.
Well, I think a lot of us can identify with what you just said about growing up in a community where people didn't talk about money. Parents didn't teach their children about money. I still don't. And we see it in today's next generation coming along. They don't understand how money operates. That's part of why, not to sound political, but it's part of why they come out of college with these massive debts on their backs. They didn't People can say they didn't know what they were doing. I don't think that's an excuse, but I do think it's a contributing factor that there's this financial illiteracy that is as damaging as not being able to read, is not being able to know about how money works. So I appreciate where you're coming from, and I think a lot of our listeners will say, "Yeah, I kind of grew up that way too."
Well, and to your point, it usually isn't talked about, and when it was talked about under stress. Maybe mom and dad were fighting. Who knows? Maybe
Hmm.
maybe you watched money cause a divorce or was a contributing factor to your parents splitting up. So it's easy to see money as maybe a necessary evil or a bad thing because you saw it only being brought up under stressful, anxiety filled, anger filled circumstances. And the tendency is then to ignore it. Like, I don't want to deal with it. And your financial health, just like your physical health, the only thing necessary for that to deteriorate is negligence. All you have to do is ignore it and it will get worse. I mean, nothing in this life gets better by accident. And we, you may not have the background with money. You may not be interested, but it is a part of your life, whether you want to be or not. I believe, Mike, that each of us are called to be stewards. We don't get a choice of whether we're a steward or not. The only choice we get is whether we're a faithful one.
Exactly right. We are a steward. The fact that everything we have belongs to God, we're managing it. The question is, as you put it, are we managing it well
Mm-hmm.
or not? And I think a lot of us would have to sort of hang our heads and say, not so well. I know many years ago I read a book called The Millionaire Next Door, and I know you've recommended that to people as well. And one of the things I remember about that book, well, a lot I remember about it, but one of the things I remember about it was the practice of these unknown millionaires, these people that literally live next door to you in the same house they've lived in for 50 years. They drive an old car. You would never know. But one of the things that they have in common is that they regularly, in a disciplined way, spend time looking at their finances, managing their finances, planning their finances. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because I know you teach that. I mean, you are a wealth manager. You don't just do it for people, you teach them how to do it for themselves also. Talk to that idea of just being a good steward, managing this wealth that God has given us, doing it well.
I think it comes down to having a plan, and you said that these millionaire next door, the folks we work with, Mike, they're blue collar millionaires. We don't work with only blue collar, but we have a lot of cops and firefighters and plumbers, electricians and welders and oil field professionals, and they dress in Carhartts and plaid shirts, and they're not out there dressed with a nice suit and driving new fancy cars. They're regular, ordinary people. But what you said is critical. They regularly do what most people rarely do. And that's what sets people apart. Some people will try a budget every now and then. Some people will put a few bucks out there towards the future or pay a little extra on their mortgage. But these people have a plan to do that with regularity. And just think about it from a fitness standpoint. You don't get in shape by visiting the gym on New Year's, the day after New Year's, and working out for 6
Driving
hours.
by and
Yeah,
waving at people. Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, we talked to people who, they're like, "Do you have a budget?" I'm like, yeah, we wrote down a budget. We haven't looked at it in 6 months. Like it's like having a diet that's written out and sits underneath a box of Krispy Kremes. Like it doesn't work if you don't execute it. So having a plan, like nobody wants to live in a house. Nobody would buy a house if you knew it was built without a blueprint, but yet we build our futures without one. And what I
Mm-hmm.
mean by that is very few of us have a plan to intentionally align our actions today with where we want to be in the future. And I think that's important in every area of your life, in your marriage, in your parenting, if you own a business, in your ministry. We just happen to do that with finances, creating a blueprint, a plan that guides people's saving, investing decisions towards future goals. So they're acting on a strategy and not reacting to the crazy world around us.
I've watched this over the years, and I just turned 70 a few weeks ago, so I'm thinking from a different perspective than a lot of people. Some of our audience are much younger than me, and so they're like, "Yeah, I'll get to that." And I can tell you from my perspective now, you don't just get to it. You better get to it now. It's not weeks and weeks and weeks of your life. It's a few hours here, a few hours there. But you used a term, and I think it's the right word. You talk about going to the gym, but to me, it's all about discipline, and not in a burdensome, legalistic. You do it because, or God will get you kind of discipline. I mean, discipline is a fruit of the spirit. It's another word for self-control. And so a disciplined approach to me seems to be the secret. Why is it, and I'll ask you specifically about Christians because most of our audience are believers. Why is it so hard for believers? You would think that the people of God would be wiser than the people of the world, but we're not. We're not any better at it. Why is it so difficult for us?
Because we're fighting against human nature. I mean, Paul wrote about that a lot. Fighting against the flesh. The things I want to do, I don't do. The things I want not to do, I
Mm,
do. We still have that. And we also have the pull of society around us. If you read through First Corinthians, I don't know how many times Paul pulls the Corinthians audience back to their identity. Do you not know that you have the mind of Christ? Do you not know that you are the temple of the Holy? He has to remind them who they are because we get pulled by the influence and the weight of the world around us. And to your point, Mike, I think it's so destructive that too often we behave with our finances. We act in our finances the same way that the world does. And then we get frustrated and we're getting the same results that the world does, living paycheck to paycheck, buried in debt, um, fighting with our spouse, being frustrated and scared about what the future brings. But if we're doing the same things everybody else around us is doing, we have to be willing to accept the same results. So, I mean, one of the chapters in my book is Dare to be Different. It's
Mm.
having the courage to go against the grain, to, again, I'm in Alaska, so we use a salmon term, but you swim upstream, you swim against the current, which is hard to do. And it isn't super complex necessarily. I mean, there are complexities to the financial industry, but it's not as complex as my industry makes it out to be. But simple often is not easy. And it's having the discipline, to use that wonderful word, you displaying discipline, exercising discipline under pressure, discipline amidst distraction, to stay on that path,
Hmm.
slowly plodding along, because it goes against our society, it goes against human nature, and it sometimes even goes against, or oftentimes even goes against, our emotions, because our emotions are calling us to do what's comfortable today. And like you said, discipline, it doesn't mean punishment. It means correction. It means training. It means to become better in many different senses. So sometimes that might involve corrections. Sometimes it might involve punishment, but it means being intentional. It means having some perseverance. You said self-control, and living a life that serves the future version of us and not
Hmm.
stealing from that person.